Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Ve sallallahu ve barak ala seyyidina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmain. Allahümme salli ve sellim ve barik ala seyyidina Muhammed el-Fatih lima ughliqul khatimi lima sebaq. Nasiril haqqi bil haqq. Vel hadi ila siratikal mustaqim ve ala alihi haqqa kadrihi miqdarihi azim. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا فعلمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, in the previous two sessions we began our discussion of the question of what we should learn and when we should learn it. So that is to say, the order of learning. And we talked in the first session about how the highest and indeed the most important type of knowledge before expending effort or money or time in anything else is to dedicate ourselves to the knowledge of Allah and His being one, His tawheed, as well as His the oneness of His attributes, His sifat. We then, last week, in the second session, talked about the second order or degree of knowledge which must be pursued, which is knowledge of things that are personally obligatory of us. And we said this is knowledge of the obligatory aspects of our human character, both things that we must do as well as the forbidden qualities of our human character. Now, this week, inshallah ta'ala, in this third session, in our third week here of Ramadan, may Allah accept, is we turn our attention now to the third degree of what we should pursue in learning before anything else, and that is things which are personally obligatory upon us as individuals in some times, but perhaps not in others. So, for example, this is something as simple as the prayer. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us in His final revelation, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ, and establish the prayer. And this command, this establishment requires that we learn what it means to pray. We learn the very spirit and the very purpose of the prayer, turning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, away from the things of this world, learning the ways and times in which this must be done. So learning the form of the prayer, as well as the obligatory 5 times of the daily prayer, and beyond that, the times in which the Prophet ﷺ had taught us by way of his sunnah to also turn to Allah, and other forms of recommended times, other times of recommended prayers. So all of these are examples of things that are personally obligatory, but in some times, meaning that there are times in your day in which prayer is obligatory, and there's times in your day when it's not. There's times in adult's life in which perhaps the prayer is foregone. For example, women during their monthly cycles, there are going to be days in which they will not be praying. Indeed, in the cycle of a human being's life, a prayer is not something before physical maturity, that is an obligation. But what it is for those who are mature and of sound of mind and their health permits, it is our opportunity to turn to our Creator and to reflect upon the very purpose of our being, and to do so by reciting the words that Allah has revealed and taught to us through His Prophet, and reciting them back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that in our prayers we are like a mirror reflecting the uncreated word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the prayer from Him and to Him. This requires knowledge. This requires knowledge that is personally obligatory, even if not in all moments. Now, what is the difference between this category and that which is prior to it? The difference here is that when it comes to our character traits, we, as long as we are awake and of sound mind, we always have the opportunity, each and every moment, to either act in a way that is beautiful and good, or act in a way that is vile and that is detestable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that is at every moment, which is why some authors, like the author that we mentioned last week, Imam Tashkoprizada, mentioned that this is personally obligatory at every moment, whereas close behind it is that which is personally obligatory in some times and not in others. Prayer is one such example. Fasting, such as the fast of Ramadan that we are in at the moment, is a similar, in the same similar third category, which is to say that there are times of the year where we do not fast, not at least as a form of obligation. And there's the month of Ramadan, where upon everybody again who is baligh, who is mature, sound of mind and sound of body, they are obliged to fast. So when a person hits the age of maturity, and before the month of Ramadan begins, one is obliged to learn. Or if somebody has become a Muslim or recently returned to their practice of Islam, before the month of Ramadan arrives, one is obliged, it is personally obligatory to learn the ahkam, the norms of the fast, what to do and also what not to do when fasting. What nullifies the fast of actions such as eating or drinking or similar, or indeed what may not nullify formally the fast, but may nullify the reward of the fast, such as when the Prophet ﷺ taught two women who had been backbiting somebody that their actions of backbiting was as if they, while fasting, was as if they had indeed eaten the flesh of their fellow Muslim whom they had been speaking ill behind their backs about. There's other examples of this, of course, with the zakat and the hajj, but beyond the ibadat. If a person is going to trade and to buy and to sell, okay, of any sort, or enter into partnerships or start up a business, okay, invest money into something, all of this requires knowledge before so doing to make sure that we stay well within the bounds of what Allah has deemed to be licit of trade. As Allah Himself has told us in the Quran, that He has made trade licit. Halallahu al-bay'. Whereas there's other forms of transactions, such as usury, riba, that Allah has proscribed. وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, He says in the same verse. This requires knowledge of what is bay', what is a valid and permissible, an ethical form of trade, of exchange of property, of making it a living and of an income, for example, and what is not, such as the usury, such as interest based loans, or taking interest, or paying interest. And so this requires knowledge. This is something that if we are going to begin to trade or to do business or to invest or to start up a business, etc., partnership with others, this requires that we do so on the footing of sound knowledge. Now, if someone has no intention to set up a business, then the particular rules of business and partnerships is not a personal obligation. But if a week or two later, a year later, we decide, no, actually, I think I will do that as a side job alongside my main job, I'll set up a little business and I'll go into partnership with a friend of mine or with someone I know. Well, now, before so doing, one has to leave off all the other things that are of interest to us to learn, and it's personally obligatory now to learn this. Similarly, if one is going to get married, before marriage, before intending marriage, the particular laws and rules and regulations and the spirit and the ethics and the akhlaq of the marriage is not an obligation upon an individual. If you learn it, well and good, but if you don't, there's no harm. But upon intending now to seek out a spouse and to then soon thereafter enter into the bonds of marriage, this requires knowledge first of whom to seek as a spouse, to ensure that one has the qualities oneself as a husband or of a wife before entering into that sacred relationship. Mithaq, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it, this is a great covenant between the man and the woman who enter into the marriage, a sacred covenant, and thus it requires knowledge. Also, to ensure that one doesn't end up doing something that could ruin or nullify the marriage by being loose in one's speech, in words of divorce, or otherwise. Learning the akhlaq of how to be a spouse such that you don't cause harm or detestation, that causing the other spouse to come to hate you because of not having learned one's basic akhlaq when it comes to living with somebody else and taking them as a spouse first. So all of these things are examples of things that are obligatory upon an individual to learn in some times. Okay, meaning before that action is undertaken. So to summarize everything we've said, if we are going to undertake some action, whatever it might be, first and foremost, before undertaking it, we must turn to asking and to learning from the people of knowledge, as derived from what Allah has revealed to us in revelation of the Quran and of the Sunnah, and what the scholars have derived from this. What do I need to know? What do I need to know before doing this? And we should stop and reflect. For many of us, if we're going to take a vacation or we're going to buy something, we'll spend days and maybe even weeks looking up the best places to go or the best models of a car to buy, comparing, researching, asking people. But then when it comes to matters that might have a very significant impact upon Allah's pleasure with us in this world or the next, we shine it on. We say, oh, I know what it means to start a business, or everybody knows what it means to be married. And we don't take these things seriously. We don't learn that which could protect us from our own devastation and harm to ourselves and to others in this world, and ultimately in the next. So this is the third thing, after having learnt the personally most highest and most important, which is knowledge of Allah, His being and His attributes, knowledge of what is personally obligatory of our character at each and every moment, is to then learn the things that are personally obligatory upon us at some times, and especially if we intend to enter into new activity, or whether in ibadat, acts of worship, or whether in our worldly affairs, that we make sure that we invest the time first to learn what it is that Allah wants of us at that moment of our doing that particular action. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all success in learning what is necessary for us, and by means of this knowledge, realizing our dedication to Him, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Him alone. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Assalamu ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.